Hello, my name's Vince Sheehan, and today I'd like to talk about Mahler's Fourth Symphony. And I'd like to go through this lovely work exploring the structures of each of its four movements. I do believe that if you really understand where you are in a classical piece of music and can really transform your listening experience and really keep you engaged in the work, particularly a long symphony like Mahler's. So if you're interested in listening closely to a piece of classical music, following the themes and the structure, this might be your kind of thing. Please click like and subscribe. Now, Mahler wrote this symphony between 1899 and 1900. Although he included a song he'd written earlier in 1892, Das himmlische Leben, the heavenly life, as the finale for this symphony. So it's a case of Mahler recycling earlier ideas, as he did so much in these early symphonies, the so-called Wunderhorn symphonies. And the fourth is the last one to be inspired by that collection of folk poetry, Das Knaben Wunderhorn, which influenced Mahler so much in these early symphonies. Now, the work was premiered in 1901 in Munich, but it was not a success. The audience seemed to think that it didn't compare well with some of Mahler's other works, including the mighty Second Symphony, which was his most popular work at the time. And people in Vienna didn't like it much either when it's premiered there. However, this work did gain a life of its own in the concert hall and in recordings as the 20th century progressed. Even in the UK, Benjamin Britten was a fan of this work. And perhaps many people's introduction to Mahler is through this symphony, after that rebirth in interest in Mahler's music in the kind of 1950s and onwards. Why this symphony? Well, for me personally, it's the length. I mean, it's only 55 minutes. And it's perhaps not as daunting to settle into as the third or the second symphonies or the ninth or whatever. But it's also very tuneful, isn't it? It's a symphony full of great melodies. And it's a symphony with this childlike charm about it. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's very much children's music. But as always the case with Mahler, there's this rather sinister edge. So it's almost as if you're watching a children's playroom with the rocking horses and the toy soldiers, etc., back in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. But you're perhaps watching things through a broken mirror. There's that kind of off-kilter, sinister edge to this music, particularly in the second movement and the development to the first movement as well. But then in the fourth movement, Das himmlische Leben, the heavenly life, we're swept up into heaven, and it's very much what childlike joy and simplicity should be, to be sung without parody, as Mahler writes in his score. And this heavenly trajectory is illustrated in the key of the symphony as well. We begin in G major, and we end the work in E major. This kind of transfiguration from the earthly life to the heavenly. Now, the first movement, Bedächtig nicht eilen, deliberate, unhurried, is a sonata rondo in form. Often described as a straightforward sonata form movement, but it isn't. It's a sonata rondo, and I'll explain as we go through. We have this quintessential opening few bars of almost Christmas winter sleigh music. That kind of thing. So evocative of childhood, isn't it? And a sense of wonder and excitement and the joy of a winter morning. And we have this very charming idea in the first violins. It goes like this. etc. It's just beautiful music, really relaxed, really easygoing. I went to a talk a few years ago now, and it was by Professor Jeremy Barham at the Royal Festival Hall about this work before the symphony has been performed. And it was really fascinating because it turns out that Mahler was more of a musical magpie than we realised, putting it mildly. And many of the melodies used in this symphony seem to have been borrowed, let's say, from earlier works from the classical period, including early Mozart symphonies and contemporaries of early Mozart who were quite obscure these days. It's a really interesting talk, and it just goes to show that Mahler not only recycled his own music from his songs in these symphonies, but perhaps it seems likely, particularly in the Fourth Symphony, melodies, themes from earlier works from other composers as well. Anyway, the way Mahler puts these themes together is masterful, and this lovely idea is just repeated many times throughout this sonata rondo form. We then come to a transition, very boisterous in nature. Which takes us into this lovely B section, real second subject idea in this sonata rondo, in D major, the dominant. We come into this lovely idea with the oboes and the bassoons doing this jaunty accompaniment. Etc. This B section seems to fade away before we're reminded of those opening sleigh bells again. And we're back into an altered and varied reprise of the opening A section. We go back to the tonic, G major, and we hear that tune again. After this return to the A section dies away to a very quiet dynamic 3Ps, we enter the development, the C section if you like. Remember, this is kind of a rondo form, but for all intents and purposes this is a development. And we return to the bells, and this development really is a kind of spoiling of this childhood innocence. No longer are things all sweetness and light. Shadows loom large, creaks and unexplained noises are heard in the playroom. Is there a monster in the cupboard? There's that kind of feel to it. And the melodies are now heard in the minor mode a lot. That triplet idea we've heard in the A melody. That idea we now hear it like this on the horns fortissimo. We've reached E minor. So motifs from that melody have got more of a sinister edge now. The melody sounds more anguished now. We hear this. But it's not all lengthening shadows in this development. We come to A major, and and we have one of those rather placid, amiable alpine moments we get in many of Mahler's symphonies. We hear these calls across the mountaintops. This idyllic pastoral calm doesn't last for long though. We pretty soon come to this crushing climax, almost a foretaste of those terrible moments of collapse in the first movement of the Ninth Symphony. Have a listen to this. We have supreme confidence in that music. Da 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 da, kind of blared out in the brass, and then all of a sudden this everything just crashes to the floor like a house of cards. Da 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 da. And then we hear those wonderful fanfares. Kind of a taster for the Fifth Symphony, hearing those da 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 da, and hearing the sleigh bells coming. It's really kind of a masterful bringing together of disparate elements, different motifs we've heard already, just brought together in this shadowy twilight, in the gloaming, in this this heady orchestral mix. It's just such wonderful writing, so marvellous. And then sure enough, the nightmare passes and we're back to the A section. There's a pause, as if nothing had happened. We're back to, and we hear a kind of variation on that A melody. And we actually hear that coming back in a canon almost, an imitative texture in the orchestra. It's a lovely way to come back to the original material. We have the transition, even more joyous and more vigorous than before, and we come into the B section again, this time in the tonic. Großer Strich, big bows. Beautiful string writing here, glorious. We hear that other cheeky idea in the B section. And finally, we have a return to the A section, that varied version of it, although this time it begins in the minor key, which rounds off this extraordinarily charming yet slightly shadowy first movement to this remarkable symphony. In the second movement, the scherzo, this work takes on an even more sinister edge. The movement's said to be inspired by Arnold Böcklin's self-portrait with Death playing the violin. And Death itself is perhaps represented by the solo violin in this movement, which is tuned up a tone, a technique called scordatura, where the string instruments are tuned in non-standard tunings. And this solo violin is such a distinctive feature of this wonderful movement. In terms of its form, and by the way, you can follow the form for all of the movements down below in the description. We have A, B, a return to A, A1, B1, a variation on B, and back to A again. But before we hear the violin, we have some very important motifs introduced. We hear this in the horns. We hear this chattering idea in the oboes. And we have this dreamlike music in the flutes. So together it's something like this. And then the violin comes in. That kind of thing. Real music from the dark side of the imagination, I think. Now this A section of this scherzo and trio is actually in a miniature ternary form itself. We have this other idea as well. We move to C major. We're back into Death's violin music, etc. The trio, in contrast, is in a rather jolly F major. In the clarinets we hear this. Full of rustic charm, this music, as is often the case in a Mahler scherzo, stroke, Ländler, whatever you want to call this. We have this other nice idea in here, which I think always reminds me of a passage in Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade, actually. Goes like this. It's really lovely, that real sentimental romantic music. Then we're back to the Death's fiddle music again in a return to the A section. We have a return to the B section, this time it's varied, where we hear this in the horns. That kind of thing. And there's this lovely surprise modulation in this section. Really lovely, isn't it? That modulation from F to D. I suppose it's a bit like the key scheme of the symphony in minuscule, from G to E at the end. Anyway, but it's a lovely change. We have a return, a varied return to the fiddle music, death fiddle music, the A section. The slow movements, the adagio, is essentially a set of double theme and variations. A bit like, say, the slow movement to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, for instance, or his Ninth Symphony, where we have two melodies presented, one after the other, and each time they come back, they are varied or modified in some way. Now, this slow movement is perhaps not as well known as other Mahler slow movements, like the Adagietto from the Fifth, for instance, or the slow movement to the Ninth or whatever. But this is such a beautiful movement, which really kind of hits you in certain points, right in the heart, which is, I guess, why we listen to music in the first place. Now, it's in G major. The first theme, the A theme, goes like this. And in the accompaniment we have this. That dum 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 dum. Listen out for that, because that rhythm is omnipresent in this movement. We hear it accompanying the A theme and the B theme. So when we get into the B section to hear the B theme, we move into E minor. And over that rhythm, this time in the bassoons, we hear this impassioned tune, Klagend, lamenting. Really striking music, and like that crash, that moment of despair in the development of the first movement, we have some incredibly powerful points of crisis in this section. Have a listen to this. And did you hear that rhythm underneath, which we heard with the other melody, the A section? So I think there's also parts of this movement which I think prefigure the Nacht music from the 7th Symphony, if you listen to some of the wind and the horn music. So basically the movement is an alternation of those two themes, A, B, A1, B1, varied every time they come back. And we have another statement of the A melody before we come to this extraordinary coda. Remember that rhythm which has permeated this movement? Bum, 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 bum. Well, now we hear it in the timpani, thundered out. As we're caught up in the coda of this beautiful movement, up into heaven, in this quite literally a rapturous moment where we are finding ourselves in the simple childlike joy of heaven itself. Have a listen to this, such an amazing moment in any Mahler symphony. Simply extraordinary, isn't it? What masterful command of the orchestra. Just amazing. And also prefigures a lot of what we're going to hear in the finale. Das himmlische Leben, the heavenly life. This song Mahler composed earlier in 1892 and felt was a fitting conclusion to this wonderful symphony. This progression from earthly experience to heavenly simplicity and joy. The song is in what you might call an arch form. What do I mean by that? Well, we have this A section, which is the main melody, which has already been hinted at in the end of the slow movement. We have a contrasting B section in the minor mode, where the bells come back from the first movement. We have a C section, which is kind of the two ideas, A and B, mixed up a bit. We have a brief return to B before we end finally with A in a completely new key in E major. But we begin in G. And what's the song about? It's really just a very childlike and some might say sentimental and naive vision of what heaven could possibly be like. There's slight hints of darkness with King Herod rearing his ugly head in the words. St. John loses the lamb. But all is sweetness and joy, dancing, merriment and feasting, while St. Peter and all the saints look on and join in the party themselves. So the song begins with in the A section with these kind of shepherd pipes, I suppose. And then over that rocking accompaniment, Vergenießen die Listen, Freunden. Now, just before the end of the A section, in fact, the B section as well, we have this rather church-like moment, which we've heard a kind of snippet of again in the third movement, the slow movement. This is the bit where Peter watches on. And then we're into the B section. We hear those sleigh bells again from the first movement. And we're into the song where St. John loses the lamb and Herod is lurking somewhere. So we have Johannes das Lämmlein auslöset, der Metzger Herodes verfasset. That kind of thing. There's hints of the first movement all over the place here. And then we have a kind of development. The C section begins, goes back to G major. We think we're going to have a direct repeat of the opening melody, the A section, but pretty soon the darkness from the B section seems to come in and threaten, albeit briefly, the serenity of heaven. We then have a very brief restatement of the B section before we go into the final statement, now in E major. And then when the singer comes in, we're back to the melody proper. Kein Musik in And this wonderful restatement of the main melody of Das himmlische Leben ends this wonderful symphony. A childlike symphony threatened by darkness, but ultimately the childlike simplicity and joy of heaven prevails. Thank you for watching this video. Please click like and subscribe. Consider donating as well if my channel has been helpful to you. The link's down below. And if you want me to look at another piece, please stick it in the comments below and I'll try and get round to it one day. All the best. Take care. Bye.